Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piz. Ukraine War news update, first part thereof, and probably only part thereof, for the 17th of August 2024. It depends what kind of late night antics I get up to. I'm so sorry that I have been unable to produce a video hitherto today. I've been out on an excursion. I've been burnt to a crisp. I'm exceptionally exhausted. I've had some insanely good memories. So it's been a wonderful day. And I thought before I pop out for a bite to eat, I would just share with you what I have gleaned. Although this has been done kind of a bit post hoc, I had no internet access today. And so therefore this has just been drawn from what I could go back sort of 12 hours to get, 12 hours plus. So if I've missed a bunch of things, I do apologize. It is what it is. I hope it's useful and interesting for you guys. And it's also well out of date, right? So this is effectively sort of 24 hours ago news. There you go. You don't have to listen, but please do. Right, the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. You can find those caveats in the description to the video below. We have some pretty high figures in personnel losses, 1,230. That's a decent number for the Ukrainians there. That will be largely as a result of what's going on in Kursk, still taking a lot of prisoners up there, still having some success in much of that area. There's talk about the destruction of bridges and this whole area of the Glushkovsky district being sort of cut off, and then the Russians pulling to the east of the River Seine, I believe, in Tetkino area. So there's possibly some other areas for the Russians to be concerning themselves with. Anyway, 1,230 is a good day for the Ukrainians there. 5 tanks is so up and down in that tank category, but it's at the lower end of the range that we've seen. 12 troop carrying AFVs is also below the daily average there. 58 artillery systems is yet again 3 times plus the daily average. So the Ukrainians still doing an incredibly good job of taking out artillery systems. It could be Magyar's birds and other drone units that are largely responsible for that, as opposed to counter battery fire and other forms of artillery destruction. Now, 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system would be good if they were high value pieces of kit. Well, the anti-aircraft warfare system particularly. 65 vehicles for fuel tanks is pretty healthy, and 15 pieces of special equipment is also good. I couldn't find an Andrew Perpetua loss list for yesterday, so I don't think he's done one. I do apologize again if he has actually done one. You can check it out for yourselves. See if I have missed anything or not. So unfortunately, no open source verification of losses there. We do have, well, we'll come to a Nalcio update in a second. Washington Post report says Tim White from a prison in Ukraine where POWs captured in Kursk are taken. Now, I presume this is not all of them, because there have been talk of about 2,000 prisoners having been taken, or it might just take a long time for these people to get all the way down to that prison. But it says in the last 10 days, 320 of them have arrived. So that's certainly lower numbers if that's where all of them go. So lots of variables and pinches of salt to be taken here. But the main point is that of the 320 of them that arrived, only 20% were contracted and mobilized. So that means that 250 of those 320 from Kursk were conscripts. This goes back to the very important point that if the Russians lose a lot of very young conscripts, part of their national conscription, annual conscription, takes place in a couple of phases over the year. They lose those troops as POWs and indeed dead in body bags, then you will start getting the Afghanistan effect, where you will have very upset mothers and family members losing young Russian men. Okay, War Monitor says Ukrainian paratroopers from the 82nd Air Assault Brigade conducted a successful ambush in the Kursk region of the front line, capturing a Russian unit and inflicting damage on others. So some success again coming from Kursk, hopefully leading to some good numbers in that area. As you can see, 1,230 is pretty decent, and one must think that most of that must come from Kursk. Now, this is another Nalcio update for visually confirmed losses. So these updates include the visually confirmed losses. Sorry, I got a bit of an interruption there. And this is from the Pokrovsk direction. We've seen that the Ukrainians have lost more than the Russians up in the Kursk direction because they are on the attack. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are on the attack. And what I think is important to note is whether the Russians are losing more when they go on the attack than the Ukrainians do when they go on the attack. Who is doing a better job of attacking and not suffering as much attrition to their own forces? And it seems like the ratio is less worse, if you like, for the Ukrainians up in Kursk than it is for the Russians down in Pokrovsk. So there is about a 5-to-1 total ratio at the moment. And then we look at the additional losses that have been added since the last summary, and we have 93 Russian losses and 21 Ukrainian losses. So that's about a 4.5, I think, ratio, a 4.5-to-1 ratio of Russian losses to Ukrainian losses. So now 1,617 Russian losses to 319 Ukrainian losses there. So this shows that although Pokrovsk is thoroughly problematic for the Ukrainians in terms of losing territory, they are attriting the Russians at tremendous rates still, and that is visually confirmed. So rough with the smooth, isn't it? I guess in that area. Okay, going on. A Russian Ka-52 helicopter has been downed by a MANPADS, Man Portable Air Defense System, anti-aircraft missile complex. But I think that looks like the same footage that the General Staff released the other day, although we haven't seen it being taken out in midair there. But the after effects does look like the Ka-52 that was lost on the first day of the Kursk incursion. So take that with a pinch of salt, but the Euromaidan press there showing that showing a Ka-52 taken down. If it's another one, then that's really good news for the Ukrainians. Right. Yuri Ignat has said that the Ukrainians have lost a MiG-29, but the crew survived, and that was from yesterday. Now, I don't know if it's the MiG-29 from this footage here. So Michael McKay says, Step 1, the United States protects air bases and launch sites of Russian terrorists in the Russian Federation, banning the use of US-supplied weapons. Step 2, granted safety by the Americans, Russian terrorists launch an Iskander missile. And Step 3, a Ukrainian MiG-29 is destroyed. Yeah, so there you go. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's gone on here, how this MiG-29 was destroyed and whether it was on the ground. So we've got a MiG-29 that appears to be parked at an airbase, gets blown up. And then Yuri Ignat said they lost a MiG-29, but the crew survived. I don't know whether this is another MiG-29 and one was taken out in midair and the crew ejected, or whether this was one preparing to take off and the crew were nearby, but they survived. Or, you know, two separate ones or the same one. Right. Another sort of potentially bad bit of information for the Ukrainians here. So Ukraine Battle Map says there is another video of Ukrainian Patriot launchers being hit by another Iskander-M missile in Dnipro. The damage, or if it's a decoy, is unknown. So it's been geolocated to Dnipro, same location as an S-300 that was destroyed earlier this year. Now, lots of people talking about both this and potentially an RST as well. So John Ridge from Turchny says, Ukrainian Patriot remote launcher group with 4 claimed launching stations. This is a real Patriot RLG as a M903 LS fires 2 PAC-3 rounds against an incoming Iskander-M. Effects are unclear, but the LS are likely damaged. He goes on to say, one of 6, that neither an antenna mast group nor communications relay group and electric power unit are visible. The CRG, acting as the RLG's launcher control station plus AMG and EPU, wasn't placed at a different site. Okay, I don't know what any of that means. RL1 enables the CRG LCS to communicate with LS up to 10 kilometers away via VHF. In other words, you don't have to have the stuff right next to the launchers. Remote launchers optimize Patriot's defended area against tactical ballistic missiles, but create dead zones for air-breathing threats. Remoting launchers in this instance is unusual, as the RLG does not have Dnipro within its defended area for TBM, so ballistic missiles. with PAC-3 or PAC-3 MSE, claimed Ukrainian Patriot fire unit with 2 LS and an MPQ-65 radar set. Given its location, this cannot be the RS supporting the RLG, as their separation is greater than 30 kilometers allowed by the AMG's UHF link. It is likely that the fire unit is a decoy. So this is the conclusion, really, that you want to hear. It is likely that this fire unit is a decoy based on its emplacement and a lack of certain equipment. The LS are emplaced greater than 80 degrees from the primary threat line. This places them in a dead zone, and the RS will be unable to establish missile communication at launch. Neither an engagement control system, an AMG, nor an electric power plant are visible. These provide power to the MPQ-65RS, so the radar, and links to the M903LS, as the RS cannot directly communicate with the LS plus command and control. Okay, this is wholly inconsistent with a correctly placed Patriot. So, loads of acronyms there that I do not know. But the end result is that John Ridge thinks that it is probably a decoy because of how it was positioned, that it didn't have the needed power units to supply those pieces of kit, and so on and so forth. War Vehicle Tracker says Russian forces also released footage of a hit on a Patriot and RST. So he's talking about, I think that probably that Patriot one we just seen reference to. And an RST. I'm about 100% sure that the RST is a finely made mock-up. So he reckons the RST is a decoy. I'm about 60% sure that the Patriot is a decoy. So John Ridge reckons he thinks it was a decoy. War Vehicle Tracker, who is he's very much a realist. If Ukrainian stuff gets destroyed, he will tell you. Due to small fire visible on the claimed radar. No tracks, no secondaries, no support vehicles. So somewhat similar to what John Ridge was saying there. Now, with regard to the RST, German to Ukraine says in the Sumy region, Russia claims to have destroyed an RST SLM launcher by using the Iskander-M missile. I can't identify the vehicle labeled as a TRML-4D radar of the fire unit. As such, the launcher cannot be identified beyond doubt as a real one. The impact caused no missile cook-off, no fire. The video material is cut off at the end and shows no aftermath. Clear case for me. This is often the problem with hey, loud music, awesome. This is often the case with Russian claims that if they are dodgy claims, they cut off and you don't see any kind of battle damage assessment. Where if there was genuinely something to see, they would keep the video rolling because that reconnaissance drone is still there. It's not been shot down. It's not shut off. So that is editing, and if that is editing that doesn't show damage that you would want to show, then it's likely that damage didn't happen or is not to the damage you thought it was or hoped it was. So could be that the Ukrainians have lost both an RST surface-to-air missile system and a Patriot or elements of a Patriot. But it could well be, and it's probable that they were decoys. Okay, onto distance strikes. There was one missile fired by Russia, got through air defense, and it did cause injuries and damage to Sumy. We'll look at that in a second. But otherwise, 14 out of 14 of the Shahed drones were shot down. So that's a good 100% interception rate. Excellent news there for the Ukrainians. Now, for that missile that did get through, the missile that got through the air defense was an Iskander ballistic missile. With Sumy being so close to the border, there's almost no time to react and stop those warheads. Luckily, only one woman was injured when the city was hit shortly after dawn. And this appears to have just landed directly in the middle of Sumy city and was, it's completely unacceptable. As Oliver Carroll here says, horrible scenes for Sumy where a Russian missile landed in the middle of the main street. Our team was staying close to this spot a couple of days ago. The grotesque thing is the world has somehow got used to this happening. And that is so true, that kind of normalization of horrific things of war crimes taking place is such a shame. Right, utter devastation this afternoon, says Tim White in Myrnihad, another apartment block and supermarket. It was hit by one of Russia's aerial bombs. I read this morning plans are underway to evacuate the town in Free Donetsk, with the front line only just 6 kilometers away. Journalists are there at the scene. So there's some of these towns close to the Pokrovsk front line and further up, indeed, your Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and so on and so forth, are under such a lot of pressure. Now, the bridge that was hit in Same that I reported on my Kursk video yesterday, my goodness. So this is damage that was done previously with these sort of very precise holes in the bridge. Romanov, the Russian mill blogger, drove past and got out the car and he showed you them. And then it was properly blown up and, completely collapsed. And my goodness, I'd like to know what they used to do this, because the explosion is absolutely huge. So I won't show you that, but in its full glory, but you can go and find that online. So that bridge has been blown up. I believe the second bridge has also been taken out in the same general area, another bridge further up the river, meaning that the Russians are looking like they could well be cut off logistically in that pocket, the other side of the river in Kursk, if you know where I'm talking about. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces, quite a few things here. So there's a lot of talk about some horrific war crimes that the Russians have been involved in again. Radio intercept about these war crimes has surfaced, so it's genuine. I mean, there's video evidence of this that is horrific, and these concern. Well, the talk here is a radio intercept about the beheadings shown in the ISIS-like video of the Russian 155th Brigade. In the radio intercept, the commander gave the order to behead 4 people and put their heads on sticks, like in the gruesome video. One of the victims is presumably a captain in the Ukrainian army. The filming occurred likely near Kolotilovka. Now that's interesting because that's just over the border into Russia, where there was some fierce fighting, and I think the Ukrainians pulled back across the border. This is really terrible stuff here, and that's an absolute travesty that has happened. Now, Ukraine has complained to the Red Cross and the UN after Russia again paraded around what they claimed was the head of a Ukrainian soldier on a spike. Graphic images that I've accidentally shown there and had to blur out, but that terrible stuff from the Russians. Now, Russia summoned the Italian ambassador over a journalist working in Kursk Oblast. So I don't know if you caught that I made reference to an Italian journalist who was in Kursk interviewing Russians there and showing that actually they were being treated really well. And there's more footage coming out today of Ukrainian forces in Kursk providing water and much needed supplies for those who've been essentially abandoned by their own government and forces. Now, Russia's foreign ministry claimed that the journalist crossed the border into Kursk illegally while reporting on Ukraine's ongoing offensive in the region. Whatever. And here we have the spokesperson for the Department of Defense, or for the Pentagon, in the US saying this. So the question was, why are long-range strikes on Ukraine still viewed as escalatory? The answer was long-range strikes don't help Ukraine liberate their territory, and of course we're worried about escalation. In other words, escalation. We have heard as well now, it seems to be pretty much a fact that it is the US who are stopping the UK's Storm Shadows being used by the Ukrainians into Russian territory. And that is something that's really frustrating the Ukrainians. There's a lot of anger about that. We heard Keir Starmer say, yep, you can use them. And then the MOD had to put out a corrective. But the corrective really was something coming from the US saying that if you use Western supplied weapons, go for it. You can use them. You've got every right to use those Storm Shadow missiles. But if you do, we won't supply you with any more weapons ourselves. So the Ukrainians have really been given some restrictive regulations by the Americans. Now, here's a claim that the US does not share intelligence, and this is according to the Wall Street Journal, about Russian targets with Ukraine, so as not to be seen as a party to the offensive of Ukraine. I don't know about this, because we have heard that they have been helping in targeting with HIMARS much earlier on in the war a number of times. But the idea is that they are not sharing intelligence with the Ukrainians at the moment. I would find that staggering if that was the case, and would it would make me super angry. But I have a feeling that the Americans must be helping Ukraine with satellite imagery, real-time satellite imagery and targeting capabilities, because anything other than that would just make my head blow off. Anyway, Fears grow that Russia will soon stage a nuclear false flag terror attack to deflect from the catastrophic failures that are taking place in Kursk. And yeah, that is pretty predictable if that does happen. As in, lots of people have talked about this for a long time over different disasters for the Russians. I call this the Putin paradox, which is the better that Ukraine do in the war, the more likely it is that Russia will do something nuts, something nuclear. Putin will end up doing something absolutely terrible in response to Ukraine doing something really well. Okay, just a few more nuggets now. So, has the Ukrainian counteroffensive into Kursk dented Putin's popularity in Russia? I did find this interesting. Content analysis by Filter Labs finds opinions towards Putin continuing to slump on Russian social media. That's interesting. So the Kursk incursion started there and actually continues in the same downward trend, but then it dips a whole load more. So I think Kursk has taken a really big effect on the popularity of Putin. However, that seemed to have been slumping anyway. And yeah, so it had gone up in July. There are certain things that have happened, like Prokrovsk. Things were getting successful for the Russians. Certain things happening in the world of geopolitics. It does go up and down, one would think, but it looks very low there, as according to at least this source. Mark Galliotti then continues, of course, there are limitations given the demographic bias of using social media, etc., but also give the limitations of conventional polling in an authoritarian regime. Arguably, this is as good an index of public sentiment as any. Okay, then we have some more disasters, quite literally, for Russia in terms of, goodness me, they've had one physical, geographic catastrophe after another. They've had floods, they've had fires, they've had more floods, they've had more fires, and now there has been a serious natural disaster of a volcanic eruption in Kamchatka, followed by a powerful earthquake of 7 on the Richter scale, and the ash column has risen to a height of 8 kilometers from that volcanic eruption. I don't know what the ramifications of that are or will be, but it seems like Russia is in a spot of bother in terms of natural disasters. Now, this just blows my mind. I wonder how Elon Musk will comment on this, says Anton Gerashchenko. Considering that war criminal Kadyrov is under US sanctions, that doesn't look like a good ad campaign for Tesla Cybertruck. So, what is this? Well, it's just so annoying. You basically got Ramzan Kadyrov attaching a massive heavy machine gun to the back of a Tesla Cybertruck, the new Tesla vehicle that has been fairly controversial at the best of times anyway. Kadyrov said he received a Tesla Cybertruck from Elon Musk. What is Elon Musk doing giving a Tesla Cybertruck to a criminal warlord from Chechnya who is on the side of Russia overtly? I mean, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Musk, then I don't know what does. He promised to send it to the, quote, special military operations zone and attached a machine gun to it. Quote, this is Kadyrov saying this. Elon, thank you. Come to Grozny. I will receive you as a most dear guest. I do not think that our Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be against such a trip. And of course, we are waiting for you for your new developments that will contribute to the completion of the SMO, Kadyrov wrote on his Telegram channel. Elon Musk, hey? Need I say more? Finally, there's been a cyber attack on Monobank, Ukraine's largest direct bank. That is not uncommon. I remember speaking to Greg Terry about this, saying he was in. I think multiple times he's been in banks when they have been directly under attack by cyber attacks, and he has had to just wait in the bank for like 2 hours before he can do the transaction he needed to do because the Russians were attacking him. So it's a regular thing, this, but hopefully it hasn't caused too much of an issue. Of course, these sorts of attacks have direct financial implications, economic implications. And it's, of course, true that the Ukrainians are doing this an awful lot to the Russians. I don't know how successful the Ukrainians have been in terms of hitting Russian banking entities, but certainly many, many other entities within Russia have been consistently hammered by Ukraine's cyber warfare units. Anyway, that's enough from me. I hope that was of use and of interest to you. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all of your support. Take care, guys, and speak soon.